Karrie Eslami. She was not able to be here in person, so we have a pre-recorded presentation, but she will be taking questions afterwards, so via iBeam. So we're very excited. Thank you.
Excuse me 1 second. My role here today is to press the play button.
Hi, I'm Motahhare, and today I'm going to talk about the work I've done when I was an intern at the Adobe Research with my colleagues at the University of Illinois and University of Michigan about communicating algorithmic process in online behavioral advertising. And I'm sorry that I couldn't be present here to give the talk in person, but hopefully I'm standing here as a beam and I would love to take your question at the end of the talk. Today, an average online user is exposed to more than 11,000 online ads per month, while a large portion of these ads, like these two here on my Facebook page, are algorithmically tailored to users. However, it's still usually opaque to users at how online advertising algorithms tailor ads to them. And this opacity has raised privacy concerns, mistrust, and dissatisfaction among users, resulting in calls for algorithmic transparency. These calls have been from regular users who want a firmer understanding about how their ads are generated, to researchers and activists who argue users want openness with marketers, and even to governments that ask for a right to explanation about opaque algorithmic decisions made for users. Algorithmic transparency, however, is not a straightforward problem to solve. First of all, explaining a complex algorithm's behavior in a non-technical way to regular users is way challenging, if not impossible. And even in the cases that it's easy to provide such explanations, previous work has shown that too much transparency can be as detrimental as too little transparency. And finally, providing explanations are more challenging in behavioral advertising because for some people, ads are one of the least favorite aspects of the online experience, and revealing the ad curation process to them might even create new privacy concerns, erosion of trust, and preference for personalized ads. Therefore, in this study, we have tried to understand users' perception of and evaluation of the communication mechanisms of the algorithmic curation process to provide a better design for the current transparency mechanism. To do so, we recruited 32 participants with diverse demographics and designed the lab study with 5 phases to expose users to different levels of disclosure about the algorithmic ad curation process. In the first phase, that we call it the ad explanation view, we expose participants to some of their own real ads, like this one, and their explanations, like this one. Such explanations are the current way that some advertisers choose to communicate why an ad was shown to a user. For example, this one says that the advertiser, that was the New York Times, wanted to target people who were very liberal, 18 and older, and live in the United States. And we found many different types of ad explanations with varying details that try to expose users to as many of them as they have. And you're going to see more types of these explanations through the presentation. In the next phase, that we call it the speculative design task number 1, we asked participants to choose another ad that they found interesting or relevant to them without looking at its explanation, if it had any. Then guess why the advertiser tailored that ad to them, and then write an explanation for this ad as they wish the advertiser would show them. So we asked them to be as creative as possible and write whatever they think they would like to see in the explanation. In the next phase, that we call it the algorithm view, we expose users to their algorithmically inferred attributes that a few advertisers choose to reveal. For example, here you can see some of the interests that the Facebook advertising algorithm inferred about me, including my interest in dogs, kittens, and interestingly, dental floss that I admit I use frequently, but I had no idea it could be an interest. After observing the algorithm view, we exposed users to a higher level of disclosure, the advertiser view, in which they could see how an advertiser targets its audience. We particularly showed them the Facebook advertiser tools that allows a very detailed audience targeting with more than 29,000 features. We gave a demo to the participants with different features and asked them to explore the tool as much as they want, like you see here an example of that. After playing with the advertiser view, we engaged participants in a second speculative design task in which we asked them to first think of a product of interest that they might buy in the future, and then use the advertiser view to create an audience consisting of users similar to themselves, meaning that we ask them to actually target themselves. And we then ask them that since they are targeted people like themselves, if they publish this ad and they receive it on their Facebook, what they would like to see as the explanation. This task complements the first speculative design task, since in the first task users were not aware of the exact reasons for why an ad was shown to them, while in the second task they were exactly aware of those reasons because they designed the audience themselves. This task together helped us to know how awareness of the hidden attributes of the system impact the way users want their desired ad explanation to look like. By conducting this study, we aim to answer two research questions in particular. In the first research question, we aim to understand users' perception and evaluation of existing ad explanation and how their desired ad explanation would look like. Analyzing users' evaluation of existing ad explanations, we found that participants' evaluation varied based on the interpretability, creepiness, and the linkage to the identity of an ad explanation. In terms of interpretability, we found that most of advertisers use vague and simplistic language like this explanation here to describe why an ad is shown to the user, by saying things like this ad has been matched to your interest based on your browsing activity without specifying what were those interests or activities. Such explanations were called a black box by users, and the most vague explanation that can possibly be put together that users don't do anything because they thought that the advertisers don't really wanted them to mess with the ad or the explanation. Therefore, on the other hand, when an explanation like this one described the specific reasons for why an ad was targeted to users usually liked it more than the other vague ones. For example, this one says that this advertiser wanted to reach people who have visited their website or their apps and are between 18 and 54 and live in the US. And users said that they are much more comfortable with this ad because they understand it more. Besides the interpretability, we also found that the creepiness of an explanation played a role in users' evaluation of it. For example, this specific explanation turned out to be creepy for some users because, as you see in the left side, it says that the user looked at this cat bed and this cat scratching board, and it turned out that those users who looked at these two products ended up purchasing the cat scratching post and the furniture bed on the right side, and that's why the advertiser suggested those products to the user. And participants said that this sounds creepy to them because it keeps track of the exact products that they were looking at. Finally, we found that participants preferred those ad explanations that had a link to their identity. For example, when an explanation like this one only talked about the general type of information that the advertising algorithm might use, like the type of the websites or the cookies and other type of information, participants argued that it took an impersonal approach to explain something like a personal ad that is contradictory to them. On the other hand, users liked when an advertiser clarified what features of them resulted in seeing an ad, because users, as they argued, they like to see how they are categorized. For example, this explanation said that because the user was labeled as a very liberal user, she got to see this ad, which users argued that shows that the advertiser is going an extra mile to tell what type of features in their identity resulted in this ad. And interestingly, we found the same patterns in the user's designed ad explanation, meaning that they try to make the explanation interpretable, not creepy, with a link to their identity. For example, here you see The audience, similar to himself, that the participants targeted via the advertiser view for a video game in the second speculative design task. And here is the design ad explanation, saying that seems like you are young, hip, and enjoy electronic music and video games. And when we looked at the explanation, we found that while it's interpretable, not creepy, and also have a link to the identity of the user as being young and hip, it wasn't necessarily complete. So when we asked the participants that why he only chose 3 out of 8 features that he used to target the audience, he said that I think I would like to have categories that are more cultural rather than this specific. And we found this pattern among many of the designed explanations. This shows that for having satisfying explanations, users don't necessarily need full transparency, but enough transparency. As the next set of results, we investigated also users' evaluation of their hidden inner variables of a system, like the algorithm view and the advertiser. We found that users generally expressed great satisfaction with their algorithmic self, that is, their algorithmically inferred attributes, about those traits that they were proud of. For example, this user was proud of his political view and was glad that the algorithm found about that. On the other hand, if users' algorithmic self was not aligned with the feature that they're proud of, they stated their satisfaction and sometimes anger. For example, this participant was quite angry when the algorithm labeled him as a late technology adopter, while he argued that they have all the newest crap and the algorithm should call them an early technology adopter. We also found that before walking through the algorithm view, several participants illustrated a strong belief in algorithmic authority, meaning that they believe the advertising algorithms already know them very well. And due to this perception about algorithmic authority, when participants found an incorrect inferred feature about themselves, rather than stating that the algorithm was simply wrong, many tried to find reasons to justify those mistakes. For example, for these participants that the algorithm inferred incorrectly that he is interested in Whole Foods while he never has been to Whole Foods, he tried to find a reason by connecting it to the fact that the Amazon has recently purchased Whole Foods and he uses Amazon frequently. However, after participants observed more and more incorrect or sometimes funny and meaningless inferred attributes about themselves, such as, for example, their interest on Wednesdays comparing to the other days of the week, or or breaks, or maybe naps sometimes, they started to argue that the algorithms are not surprisingly as good as they expected. And this led them to what we call algorithm disillusionment, a transition from believing that their robots know me to the belief that maybe you are not as smart as I thought you were. And this transition helped that the wrong belief that the algorithms are infallible and all-knowing subside among users. So far, we found users' evaluation of different communication mechanisms of the algorithmic ad curation process and what are the best practices. But the question is that how we can implement these mechanisms in design. This is particularly a challenge because during this study, we found the existing communication mechanisms, even those that the users were completely satisfied with, were not transparent enough. Therefore, most of the participants in our study stated that they either never saw these disclosure mechanisms, or if they saw them, they never trust them enough to click on these. So the question here is that how we can improve the visibility of the transparency mechanisms. One suggestion as an alternative design could be embedding the explanation to the ad as a fine print, as some of the participants argued that why the advertisers just don't tell them directly why they saw an ad. And we actually saw that practice in a few ads online when the advertiser, like here, tried to add a fine print saying, like, we've shown interest in Uber for this Uber ad to let the user know that why they've seen this ad. And we believe this is a good practice to follow to make it more clear the reason for seeing an ad by user. The other alternative design that was also inspired by the designed ad explanations via many of our participants was making the explanation the ad itself. For example, this participant's desired explanation says that as an active person who loves music, you should be able to bring this speaker wherever you go. And as she describes it, this explanation, that is why am I seeing this ad, actually becomes the ad. And looking at several real online ads, we actually found a couple ads that follow the same pattern. For example, this ad says that the internet told us that we were looking at the best online appointment scheduler, so try our application. We believe such alternative designs can help users to be more exposed to the communication mechanisms of the algorithmic ad curation process, which would help them to understand the ad curation process and their ads better. And while this study focused on advertising algorithms in particular, I want to emphasize that our goal is to go beyond these algorithms and learn guidelines about how to communicate algorithmic process in general in different socio-technical systems to help users to gain algorithm literacy. We particularly believe that if we design algorithmic systems in a way that convey algorithm limitations to users, it can help them to achieve algorithm disillusionment, and this would be very critical in those algorithmic systems that might be biased or make wrong algorithmic decisions, because we think in those systems users' mistrust of the system actually is a good thing. And finally, I'd like to end my talk with this funny but at the same time disillusioning algorithmic decision that was made for this specific topic. With that, I'd like to thank you all for listening to this talk, and I'd be happy to take your question. Thank you.
Again, if you have questions, please come up and we'll facilitate that. Well, as we wait, so I'm curious. So LaTanya Sweeney's like famous for talking about behavioral advertising, kind of in the job domain, or not the job domain, but where she was targeted with ads that suggested that she had a criminal record, and these very kind of small, maybe they don't happen that often, but they have these huge impact. And I was wondering if you had any thoughts about how your work, how it maybe changes, or how the explanation should perhaps be stronger in that type of instance. Yeah. There's a domain of advertising that is very targeted. I was wondering if you thought how you're looking at that.
Explanation might help that.
Yeah, in these high-profile instances.
I think in those cases, actually, if we make advertisers to have explanations, like a mandatory thing, in those high-profile cases, it might even stop them to start target those people in those sensitive groups. So what we look actually here is making this as a regulatory design, like that advertisers have to provide information to users, therefore they can't be creepy because users don't like creepy explanations, meaning that they don't. The advertisers should not actually target those creepy or sensitive information of users.
Hi, it's working. Hi, thank you for your talk. My name is Helene Rutjes. I'm from Eindhoven University of Technology. And I was particularly interested in the part where you said that if you open up an algorithm or explain it, that and it's actually very accurate, that users perceive it as creepy. And there might also be a sentiment like, if the algorithm is not perfect, then people are sort of relieved, like, oh, phew, and therefore I was thinking, should we aim for perfect, accurate algorithms, or maybe will the user experience, or will it make us happier? If we, well, either are not very open about every explicit detail, or just maybe, yeah, not be perfect at all. Do you see where I'm heading to?
I got the question. The question is that it sounds if the algorithm is very accurate, users think it's creepy, but if it's imperfect, users get relieved or something. Is that your question? Yeah. I think actually that's not completely right. I mean, that's a really good question because we had these thoughts during the study, but it turned out that there are many cases that the algorithm was completely right and people were so happy, particularly if there was a link to their identity, like if saying that you are an early technology adopter, that's why we are suggesting this. The issue with those specific explanation is that the advertiser actually followed something very creepy, like looking at what they click on a website or something. So for those, what we think is that the advertiser should stop doing that. But still there could be many patterns that users found non-creepy but still accurate. So it's kind of a trade-off between what that accuracy lies on, like, is it a sensitive information or no, it's just an information that people are okay with that to be tracked.
Thank you very much. Let's take Motahhare. And next up we have Oscar Alvarado.